Keanu Reeves, standing near his motorcycle, filling up the tank, turned his head toward the commotion. His sharp eyes immediately landed on the source of the noise, a gruff-looking biker, dressed in worn leather and heavy boots, lifting his leg as if ready to kick again. The intended target? A scruffy, trembling dog, barely held back by a thin leash in the hands of a homeless man. The biker sneered, his voice slurred with aggression. "Filthy mutt nearly got in my way," he spat, raising his boot once more. Keanu didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his movements unhurried, yet purposeful, like a shadow moving through the night. "Hey," Keanu's voice cut through the tension. Calm, steady, but with a weight that couldn't be ignored. "That's enough." The biker hesitated, his foot hovering mid-air as he finally took in the man who had spoken. He scoffed, recognizing Keanu's face. "Well, look who it is. Hollywood hero. You here to save the day, movie star?" Keanu's expression didn't change. He simply tilted his head, eyes locked onto the biker with quiet intensity. "I'm just here to remind you that kindness doesn't cost anything," he said smoothly. "And neither does walking away." Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video so you don't miss tomorrow's video. A tense silence settled between them. The biker held his stance, lips curling into a smirk as he eyed Keanu up and down. "Kindness," he scoffed. "You think kindness pays the bills, pretty boy?" Keanu remained calm, his eyes steady. "It pays in ways you don't always see," he replied. "And right now, it's the only thing keeping you from making a mistake you'll regret." The homeless man, still clutching his dog's leash, kept his head down, his shoulders hunched. His dog, a wiry little terrier mix, whined softly, eyes darting between Keanu and the biker. A small audience had started to gather, an attendant behind the gas station counter peering through the glass, a man at a nearby pump frozen mid-fill. The weight of unseen judgment pressed down on the situation. The biker let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "You really think some fancy speech is going to stop me?" Keanu took a slow step closer. His voice, though soft, carried a quiet authority. "I think you know it already has." For a moment, there was nothing but the distant hum of the freeway, the buzz of the gas station lights. The biker's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. But then, he glanced around. The onlookers, the silent expectations, the reflection of himself in Keanu's unwavering gaze. Something shifted in his expression. With an exasperated grunt, he stepped back, shaking his head. "This ain't worth my time." He turned on his heel, stomping toward his motorcycle. The crowd exhaled as he swung a leg over the seat, revved the engine, and with a final glare at Keanu, tore off into the night. Keanu watched him go, the tension slowly unraveling from the air. Then, he turned to the homeless man and his dog, kneeling slightly to meet them at eye level. "You okay?" he asked. The man nodded, eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. I didn't think he'd stop." Keanu smiled gently. "People don't always need a fight to change their minds. Sometimes, they just need a reason to walk away." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small card and handing it over. "This place," he said, tapping the print. "They'll check on your dog. No charge. Just tell them Keanu sent you." The man's hands trembled as he took it, his lips pressing together. "I don't know how to thank you." Keanu patted the dog gently on the head. "Just take care of him," he said with a nod. The little terrier wagged its tail, pressing its nose against Keanu's palm. The soft rumble of the biker's engine had long faded into the distance, but the weight of what had just happened still hung in the air. The gas station's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a dim glow on the pavement. The homeless man stared at the card in his hands, his fingers tracing over the embossed letters. "You mean it?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "They'll really help my boy?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, they're good people. Just give them a call or stop by. They'll take care of him." The small dog, sensing the change in atmosphere, wagged its scruffy tail and licked Keanu's hand as if offering his own thanks. Keanu chuckled softly, giving the pup a gentle scratch behind the ears. Behind them, the gas station attendant had stepped outside, a young man in his early 20s, still in his work apron. He shifted awkwardly before clearing his throat. "Hey man," he said to the homeless man. "If your dog needs food or anything, I got some extra inside. It's on me." The homeless man blinked in surprise. "You don't have to do that." "I know." The attendant replied with a small shrug. But I want to. A strange thing happened then. An unspoken ripple effect. The man who had felt invisible moments ago was suddenly seen. Not just by Keanu, but by everyone who had witnessed what happened. Keanu smiled. See, he said quietly. Kindness spreads. The homeless man wiped at his eyes quickly, nodding. Guess I'd better take him in, then. He clutched the card tightly. Thank you. Really? Keanu patted his shoulder. Take care of yourself too, all right? As Keanu's motorcycle disappeared down the highway, the gas station parking lot remained unusually quiet. The young attendant, still holding the door open, watched the homeless man kneel beside his dog. The little terrier wagged its tail, licking his owner's face as if sensing the weight lifting off his shoulders. The attendant hesitated before speaking. Hey, you got a name? The homeless man looked up, surprised someone was still talking to him. It's Ray, he said after a pause. And this little guy is Buddy. The attendant nodded. I'm Jake. He rubbed the back of his neck. Listen, Ray. I get off in a couple hours. If you want, I could drive you and Buddy over to that clinic Keanu mentioned. No pressure or anything. Ray swallowed, his fingers tightening around the card Keanu had given him. The kindness of strangers wasn't something he was used to. Most people ignored him, some crossed the street to avoid him. But tonight felt different. You'd really do that? Ray asked, his voice uncertain. Jake shrugged. Yeah, man. Why not? Ray exhaled slowly, then nodded. All right. Yeah, I think Buddy could use a checkup. From inside the gas station, another customer, an older woman who had witnessed the entire event, stepped forward. She rummaged through her purse and pulled out a $20 bill. Here, she said, offering it to Ray. Get something warm to eat while you wait. Ray's lips parted in shock. He looked from the bill to the woman, then to Jake, and finally back down at Buddy. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel invisible. Keanu Reeves had stepped in to stop a moment of cruelty, but in doing so, he had ignited something bigger, proof that a single act of kindness could spread farther than anyone could predict. Ray wiped his eyes quickly and patted Buddy's head. Guess tonight's turning out better than I thought, he murmured. Jake grinned. Yeah, man. Let's keep it going. And with that, the night carried on, one small moment at a time, changing lives in ways no one had expected. As the night deepened, Ray sat on the curb outside the gas station. Buddy curled up beside him. The little dog, warm and safe, had stopped trembling. Jake had gone inside to finish his shift, but the promise of a ride to the clinic lingered in Ray's mind. He ran his fingers over the card Keanu had given him. The print was clean and simple, Westwood Veterinary Clinic, but what caught his eye was the handwritten note scribbled underneath. Tell them Keanu sent you. Ray let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head in disbelief. Keanu Reeves. That Keanu Reeves. A guy like that didn't just step in for people like him. He wasn't supposed to be the kind of person who noticed, who cared. And yet, he had. Buddy stirred at his side, nuzzling against his arm. Looks like we got someone looking out for us, huh, boy? Ray murmured, scratching behind his ears. Inside the gas station, Jake was telling the story for the third time. A small group of late-night customers had gathered near the counter, hanging on to every word. Dude just stepped in like it was nothing, Jake said, shaking his head. Didn't raise his voice, didn't throw a punch, just talked to the guy. And man, that biker looked pissed. But he left. Just like that. An older man sipping his coffee chuckled. Yeah, that sounds like Keanu. Good guy. You've met him? A younger woman asked. Nah, the man admitted, but I've heard the stories. He's not like other movie stars. Guy's got a heart. Another customer nodded. Yeah, I read once that he gave away most of his Matrix money to the special effects and costume teams. Said they deserved it more than he did. Jake grinned. Well, I can tell you this much, he sure as hell made a difference tonight. The young woman smiled. Sounds like we could all learn something from him. The conversation died down, but the energy remained. A spark had been lit, one that would be carried home in the minds of those who had witnessed it. Back outside, Ray exhaled, feeling something shift inside him. For the first time in a long while, hope didn't feel so far away. An hour later, the gas station had quieted down, its hum of activity reduced to the occasional car pulling in for a late-night fill-up. Ray sat with Buddy curled up against his side, the warmth of the little dog reminding him that, despite everything, he wasn't alone. True to his word, Jake emerged from the gas station, pulling off his work apron and stretching. All right, man, he said with a grin. You ready to go? Ray hesitated, his fingers tightening around the card Keanu had given him. He had spent years learning not to expect much from people, always assuming offers of help came with a catch. But tonight had been different. He met Jake's gaze and nodded. Yeah, let's do this. Jake led the way to his beat-up sedan, opening the passenger door for Ray while Buddy happily hopped inside, his tail wagging as if he understood this was the beginning of something better. As they pulled out of the gas station and onto the road, Jake glanced over. So, man, how'd you end up out here? Ray exhaled, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. Life, I guess, he said with a small, tired smile. One bad turn after another. Lost my job, then my apartment. Been trying to get back on my feet ever since. Jake nodded, not pressing further. Well, at least you got Buddy, he said, giving the dog a quick scratch behind the ears at a red light. Ray smiled for the first time that night. Yeah, he's all I got. They drove in comfortable silence for a few more minutes before Jake chuckled. Man, I still can't believe it was Keanu Reeves who stepped in back there. That guy's a legend. Ray looked down at the card in his hands. Yeah, he said, his voice softer now. And he didn't have to do any of it. Didn't have to say a word. But he did. Jake nodded. That's what makes it count, man. The small neon sign of Westwood Veterinary Clinic flickered against the dark sky as Jake's car pulled into the empty parking lot. The place looked quiet, but a soft light glowed from inside. Someone was still there. Ray shifted in his seat, suddenly uncertain. You sure about this? He asked, glancing at Jake. Jake grinned. Dude, Keanu Reeves literally wrote, "Tell them I sent you." If there was ever a golden ticket, this is it. Ray let out a nervous chuckle and nodded. All right, let's see what happens. With Buddy trotting beside him, Ray stepped through the clinic's glass doors. A receptionist, a kind-looking woman in her 50s, looked up from behind the desk. We're actually closed for the night, she began, then paused as her eyes landed on Buddy. Her expression softened. Oh, what a sweet little guy. What's his name? Buddy, Ray said, gently patting the pup's head. She smiled, but then her gaze flickered to Ray, his worn-out clothes, the exhaustion in his face. Her voice remained warm. How can I help you? Ray hesitated, then pulled the card from his pocket and slid it across the counter. Keanu Reeves said you might be able to look at him. For a moment, the receptionist stared at the card, her eyes widening slightly. Then, instead of questioning it, she simply nodded. Of course. Give me just a second. She disappeared into a back room, leaving Ray standing there, shifting on his feet. Jake leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed with an amused smile. Told you. Magic words, man. Before Ray could respond, a tall man in a white lab coat appeared from the back, a veterinarian in his early 60s, with silver-streaked hair and an easygoing smile. Keanu sent you? He asked. Ray nodded. Yeah, he, helped me out back at a gas station. The vet chuckled. Sounds like him. He knelt down, gently running his hands over Buddy's frame, checking his ribs, his paws, his ears. He's in good shape, but a little underweight. Nothing some good meals and a warm place to sleep won't fix. Ray let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. That's good to hear. The vet stood and clapped a hand on Ray's shoulder. We'll get him vaccinated, cleaned up, and set up with some food. No charge. Ray's throat tightened. I don't know how to thank you. The vet simply smiled. Then don't. Just pay it forward when you can. Ray glanced down at Buddy, who was looking up at him, tail wagging, as if he understood that tonight was different. As the vet led Buddy into the exam room, Ray sank into one of the waiting chairs, running a hand over his face. He still couldn't wrap his head around how quickly the night had changed. A few hours ago, he was just another guy on the street, trying to keep himself and his dog safe. Now, Buddy was getting taken care of because Keanu Reeves had stepped in. Jake sat beside him, nudging his arm. So, what's next? Ray let out a slow breath. What do you mean? Jake shrugged. I mean, you've got a chance here, man. You got Buddy taken care of, and he gestured toward the vet's office. It sounds like these people actually want to help. Maybe it's time to start thinking bigger. Ray scoffed lightly. Bigger? Yeah, Jake said. Like, what do you want, man? What's the next step? Ray hesitated, his fingers tightening on his jeans. He hadn't let himself think about that in a long time. Life had been about survival, one day at a time. Dreams, plans, those things belonged to another life. I don't know, he admitted. It's been a while since I thought about anything past tomorrow. Jake nodded, leaning back. Yeah, I get that. He paused. But maybe tonight's a sign, you know? Maybe it's time to start looking forward again. Ray stared down at his hands. The idea scared him. But beneath that fear, there was something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. At that moment, the vet returned, Buddy trotting happily at his side, a fresh bandana around his neck and a noticeable bounce in his step. He's all set, the vet said. Got his shots, a clean bill of health, and some food to take with you. Ray reached down, scratching behind Buddy's ears. Thank you, he said, his voice quieter now. Really? The vet smiled. You don't owe me anything, Ray, but I do have something for you. Ray looked up, confused, as the vet reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. He handed it over. Ray unfolded it and felt his breath hitch. It was a job listing. Keanu's done a lot for this clinic over the years, the vet explained. He helps people who need it. And I think he sent you here for more than just Buddy. He nodded toward the paper. It's part-time work, kennel cleaning, dog walking, nothing fancy. But it's something. If you're interested. Ray stared at the paper, his heart pounding. He hadn't had a real job in years. The vet smiled. You don't have to decide now. Just think about it. Jake nudged him with a grin. Dude, if you don't take that, I will. Ray sat in the clinic's waiting room long after the vet had gone back to work, staring at the job listing in his hands. The paper felt heavier than it should have, because it wasn't just a job offer. It was a door, one he wasn't sure he was ready to walk through. Jake leaned over, grinning. You keep looking at it like it's a bomb, man. Ray smirked. Might as well be. Haven't had a real job in a long time. Jake tilted his head. And Ray sighed, rubbing his temples. And what if I screw it up? What if I can't do it? What if? Jake cut him off with a laugh. Man, you just survived a guy trying to kick your dog. You think walking dogs and cleaning kennels is harder than that? Ray huffed a laugh despite himself. Guess not. Jake nudged his arm. Look, dude, the way I see it, Keanu didn't just stop that biker tonight. He didn't just help Buddy. He gave you a shot. The real question is, are you going to take it? Ray swallowed. His first instinct was to say no, to walk out the door and convince himself it was easier to stay where he was, to keep surviving one day at a time. But wasn't that the same thinking that had kept him stuck for so long? He looked down at Buddy, who was sitting beside him, staring up with trusting eyes, tail wagging lazily. He'd fought so hard for Buddy. Maybe it was time to fight for himself, too. Ray took a deep breath, folded the paper, and put it in his pocket. I'll think about it, he finally said. Jake grinned. Good answer. The morning sun was just starting to rise as Ray stepped out of the clinic, Buddy trotting happily beside him. The cool air felt different today, lighter, almost refreshing. Maybe it was just the good sleep he finally got in a warm place. Maybe it was something more. Jake leaned against his car, sipping a gas station coffee. So, he said, raising an eyebrow. What's the verdict? Ray exhaled, reaching into his pocket. He unfolded the job listing, staring at it for a moment before nodding. I'm gonna do it. Jake grinned. Hell yeah, man. Ray laughed, shaking his head. Don't make a big deal out of it. Too late. Jake smirked. I already told the vet you'd take it. Ray blinked. Wait, what? Jake took a dramatic sip of his coffee. Figured you just needed a little push. Ray opened his mouth to argue, but instead, he just chuckled. You're unbelievable. Jake clapped him on the back. Nah, man. You're unbelievable. You just don't know it yet. Ray looked down at Buddy, who was wagging his tail furiously. Guess we better not screw this up, huh, boy? Buddy barked, as if to say not a chance. As Ray turned back toward the clinic, a strange thought crossed his mind. All of this, every moment that had led him here, started because one man had stepped in. Keanu didn't have to help. He didn't have to say anything. He could have just walked away. But he didn't. And because of that, everything had changed.